On this Thursday night, the aftershocks from BC's political earthquake. The official opposition party is folding and throwing its support behind another. So what happens now?
The party's abandoned us.
A deadly typhoon tears through southern Japan.
If the power failures really continue, then we're going to be screwed.
Fears for the millions caught in the powerful path of destruction. Disturbing details. The CIA reveals the scale of that foiled terror plot targeting a Taylor Swift concert. Plus, planets going rogue.
These objects are kind of free-floating in space.
The discovery aided by Canadian technology that's shedding light on one of the mysteries of the universe.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight in the Middle East, where Israel has agreed to temporarily pause fighting in Gaza to allow health workers to provide desperately needed polio vaccinations to about 640,000 children. That's according to the World Health Organization. This month, an infant contracted the Palestinian territory's first confirmed case of the deadly disease in 25 years. The vaccination campaign will start on Sunday in central Gaza and continue for 3 days. Then 2 more pauses in the fighting are planned for vaccinations in southern and northern Gaza. Israel says these limited pauses are not ceasefires. Relatives of Israeli hostages are demanding a ceasefire deal to bring their loved ones home. In desperation, families stood near the border and used loudspeakers to send messages for hostages still being held in Gaza. Some even broke through a barricade and ran toward the border before being turned back by Israeli police. Israeli operations in the occupied West Bank, meanwhile, are ramping up. Israel's military says it killed 5 more militants in a large-scale operation, including a well-known local commander. Palestinian authorities say 17 people have died in raids across the West Bank, which began yesterday. Eric Sorensen reports on Israel's growing fight on multiple fronts.
Palestinians are mourning the dead in the West Bank, where several reported Hamas militants, but also civilians, were killed when the Israeli military launched raids street by street this week in Jenin, Tulkarm, and other communities. They hit the house with a rocket, says this Tulkarm resident, in the middle of the night without warning. This, they say, is on top of recent attacks by Israeli West Bank settlers. Israel says the attacks are to protect its citizens in the West Bank. Israeli military videos showed what the Israelis say was a militant base inside a West Bank mosque.
We are targeting armed terrorists from the air and the ground, dismantling explosives. We apprehended wanted suspects. We located and confiscated weapons.
The Israeli rationale? Strike first before being struck, says this analyst.
The chances or the risk of terror from the West Bank is increasing, and a fear that Hamas is stepping up its involvement in the West Bank, trying to smuggle weapons and munitions.
The Israeli operation in the West Bank is stretching Israel's defense forces, escalating military activity on a third front on Israel's borders. For more than 10 months, Israel has also waged an unrelenting campaign in Gaza with aerial bombing and troops on the ground. And days ago, Israeli warplanes bombed Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon as Hezbollah launched rockets and drones into northern Israel. This week, Israel's prime minister visited troops along the Israeli-Lebanese border, saying a major attack by Hezbollah was also thwarted. Israel's resilience is being tested on many fronts.
The security challenges are accumulating. It's not fighting one front again or 2. It's basically looking all around us. 360.
But the UN says Israel's West Bank operation is deepening the catastrophic situation for the Palestinian people living there.
The Israeli security forces' use of airstrikes and other military weapons and tactics violates human rights norms and standards.
If recent Israeli operations are relatively brief, analysts believe a wider conflict is not imminent. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The war in Gaza is looming large in Washington as the race for the White House heats up. Today, the U.S. Army issued a stinging rebuke of former President Donald Trump's campaign team. It follows an apparent altercation on Monday at the Army's Arlington National Cemetery. An official with the cemetery reportedly warned Trump's staff that recording campaign videos in a sacred area where fallen soldiers are buried is a violation of federal law. Bianca Facchinei picks up the story.
Though it's been 3 years since the U.S. military left Afghanistan, it's become the center of the latest political spat of the 2024 presidential election.
The rules and regulations are very, very clear. What happened earlier this week is very unfortunate.
It all started Monday. To mark the somber anniversary of 13 American service members killed, the Trump campaign made a visit to Arlington National Cemetery.
We lost 13 great people. What a horrible day it was.
During the visit, a campaign staffer was approached by a cemetery employee for filming in a restricted area, leading to an altercation. On Thursday, the Army released a statement saying, participants in the August 26th ceremony and the subsequent Section 60 visit were made aware of federal laws, Army regulations, and DoD policies, which clearly prohibit political activities on cemetery grounds. An ANC employee who attempted to ensure adherence to these rules was abruptly pushed aside. The statement added the employee decided to not press charges, so the Army considers the matter closed. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign released a statement from families of the fallen service members saying they gave the campaign permission to bring a videographer and photographer to the event. However, federal law prohibits photography to be used in campaign-related activity. A spokesman for Democratic nominee Kamala Harris called the whole debacle, quote, pretty sad. Though Harris herself didn't comment on it, that didn't stop Trump's running mate from going after her.
You had some choice words back in Erie for the vice president. You said she can go to hell over the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Look, sometimes I get frustrated and sometimes I get pissed off, and I think Kamala Harris' failure of leadership at Abbey Gate is something to get frustrated and angry about.
And it wasn't just the Trump campaign under fire for this. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, who was at the event with Trump, apologized for including a photo of the event in a fundraising email, saying it should have never been sent out. Bianca Facchinei, Global News, Arlington, Virginia.
Turning to news here at home, an unprecedented seismic shift in BC's political landscape. The leader of the official opposition, the BC United Party, formerly the BC Liberals, announced that his entire party is folding and throwing its support behind the BC Conservatives. The move to form a centre-right coalition to challenge the governing NDP comes less than 7 weeks before BC's provincial election, and that announcement blindsided caucus members.
I'm at peace with my decision. It doesn't mean I won't get a lot of flack. I will. But I'm at peace with the decision because I think this is the right thing for British Columbia.
By doing this, we are going to have the best opportunity possible to bring an end to these radical policies.
The BC Conservatives, once considered a fringe party, have been on a meteoric rise in the polls, and those gains have come at the expense of BC United, with several of its MLAs defecting to the Conservatives in recent months. At least for now, this stunning twist spells the end of a political party that was an institution in BC and once governed the province for 16 years, now joining a Conservative party that hasn't formed a government in nearly a century. Global BC's Legislative Bureau Chief Keith Baldry joins me now from Victoria. Keith, you've been covering BC politics for a long time. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, absolutely unprecedented, Jeff. I mean, every province has experience with caucuses getting rid of leaders. This is an example of a leader getting rid of a caucus. Never seen anything like that before. And this isn't just any political party. This is BC United, formerly the BC Liberals, governed British Columbia for 16 consecutive years, now completely vanquished as a result of their leader's action, completely blindsiding the government caucus, including former Cabinet Minister Mike Bernier, who tells us he feels abandoned along with his colleagues.
He is basically disbanded everything. So we are all theoretically independents right now, waiting to see where we will land. We're still a BC United caucus, but really the party's abandoned us.
And Keith, few would have predicted this, but I'm going to ask you to predict what happens now. Where do things go from here?
Well, Mike Bernier and his colleagues are going to have to decide what they're going to do. A number of them have already announced they're not seeking re-election one way or another. Some are going to probably be asked by the BC Conservatives to run under their banner, maybe 2 or 3. And Mike Bernier, I had a long conversation with him last night, and a couple others are seriously considering running as independents. The advantage they've got, some of them have been around a long time, and their brand actually exceeds that brand of BC United or even BC Conservatives, which is a relatively new party on the scene. So it's a very much still a plan of unfolding as we see in the days ahead. Again, unprecedented times. The Conservatives all have to be very happy about this. The NDP not so happy because now that proverbial split of the vote on the centre-right appears to have disappeared.
All right, Keith Baldry in Victoria. Thanks, Keith. To federal politics now. The Conservative leader is calling on the NDP to end its coalition with the Liberal government and trigger a fall election. Pierre Poilievre argued Jagmeet Singh has supported policies that have raised the cost of living for Canadians. But as Mackenzie Gray reports, Poilievre is also facing questions about his own policies.
It's a common Conservative complaint.
Stop being sellout Singh.
Now, why did he do it?
An old request, but this time in writing.
It's all done with Jagmeet Singh's support.
Pierre Poilievre sending a letter to NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, whose name Poilievre mispronounced 7 times at his Thursday press conference, asking him to pull support from the Liberals.
Break the costly coalition with Trudeau to trigger a carbon tax election.
And that is the ballot question Poilievre wants in the next election, which if held today, he would win handily.
It drives enthusiasm. It gets people excited. It gets people who are already either not wanting to pay it or against it riled up.
Thank you very much.
But the opposition leader isn't making it clear how he would govern, ducking questions on the recent railway lockout and if he'd killed a federal program providing free insulin and birth control. But Poilievre did take a position on immigration.
We have to have a smaller population growth. We need to have a growth rate that is below the growth in housing, healthcare, and employment.
What he didn't say is if smaller population growth would come at the expense of fewer permanent residents, set at 500,000 annually for the next 2 years. But if Poilievre wants housing tied to immigration, massive cuts are unavoidable. Last year, Canada built roughly enough homes to house 377,000 people, yet the population grew by 1.27 million. An idea the Liberals also seem to recognize as they consider permanent residency cuts.
It absolutely makes sense for us to be sure that as we are welcoming new Canadians, we have the homes for them.
The politics of permanent residency cuts, the potential for reductions of family reunification admissions, which accounted for nearly 100,000 newcomers in 2022. A major concern for immigrant communities, Jeff, that both parties want votes from.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. We're learning new, disturbing details about that foiled terror plot to attack Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna, Austria this month. The CIA's deputy director revealed the suspects allegedly intended to kill tens of thousands of fans. Investigators say the main 19-year-old suspect was inspired by the so-called Islamic State. He allegedly planned to attack with knives and homemade explosives outside the stadium, where more than 30,000 fans were expected to gather. The arrests led to the cancellation of 3 of Swift's sold-out shows. A potentially life-saving alert coming up. The federal government's new earthquake early detection system. Plus, a deadly typhoon strikes southern Japan. In British Columbia, an earthquake early detection system has been activated to provide the public with up to 10 seconds of warning. When a strong tremor is detected, alerts will be transmitted automatically to British Columbians via cell phone, radio, and TV. It's also hoped they can be used to stop traffic from using bridges and prevent planes from landing. The province says the new system will give the public crucial seconds to drop, cover, and hold on. It's part of the federal government's $36 million plan to develop warning systems to protect regions vulnerable to earthquakes. The system is also expected to come online in eastern Ontario and southern Quebec later this year. In Japan, authorities have ordered more than 4 million people to evacuate their homes as a powerful storm batters the country's southwestern coastline. Initial wind gusts were over 200 kilometers an hour. Local media say at least 4 people have already been killed. Typhoon Shanshan has now been downgraded to a tropical storm, and as Redmond Shannon reports, many major manufacturing companies have been forced to close factories due to the storm's wrath.
Typhoon Shanshan striking the southern tip of mainland Japan. Sustained winds around 150 kilometers an hour, gusts topping 200, although those speeds have now been cut in half since it made landfall, downgrading it to a severe tropical storm. This typhoon is scary. We are getting a large amount of rain, says this man. This aborted landing illustrating the wind's power. Hundreds of other flights were cancelled, affecting commuters and tourists.
If the power failures really continue to go on for the next couple of days, then we're going to be screwed and we'll be stuck here a little bit longer.
So far, the storm has hit the southern Kyushu island the hardest. Companies like Toyota and Nissan closing their factories. A suspected tornado ripped through the city of Miyazaki, along with 60 centimeters of rain. The heavy rains that preceded landfall have drenched much more of the country. A landslide killed 3 people in one family on Wednesday. Shanshan is the second very strong typhoon to hit Japan this month. In July, Typhoon Gami killed more than 100 people in parts of East and Southeast Asia. An analysis led by Imperial College London published Thursday found human-induced climate change increased the storm's wind speeds and rainfall. Tropical storm Shanshan is slowly moving northeast and is currently forecast to approach the major city of Kyoto on Sunday and could pass near Tokyo after that. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Relentless monsoon rain and severe flooding are wreaking havoc in western India, where at least 28 people have died. Rescue operations are now underway as streets turn to rivers. More than 18,000 people have been forced to flee the flood zone. Meteorologists warned the devastating deluge will likely intensify into a cyclonic storm by tomorrow. In South Korea's capital, a sinkhole suddenly opened up on a busy road, swallowing an SUV. This video shows the vehicle lying on its side in the hole, about 2.5 meters deep. Workers pulled the vehicle out and began repairing the road. Hundreds of sinkholes have been reported across South Korea over the past 4 years, many caused by damaged sewer pipes. Malaysia is intensifying its search for an Indian tourist who fell into a sinkhole there about a week ago. The 48-year-old woman was walking along a road in Kuala Lumpur when the pavement beneath her collapsed. So far, rescuers have only found her slippers. Strong undercurrent flows and soil instability have hampered search efforts. Authorities say scuba divers may be sent into the sewage tunnel when conditions are safe. Canada is on the board. Still ahead, the first Canadian medalists at the Paralympics in Paris. Canada has nabbed its first couple of medals at the Paris Paralympic Games. Cyclist Kate O'Brien took the bronze medal in the women's C45 500-meter time trial. It's her second medal after she took silver during her Paralympic debut in Tokyo. The 36-year-old from Calgary also competed at the 2016 Rio Olympics. She later switched to paracycling after recovering from a severe brain injury. Quebec's Aurélie Rivard also making waves of her own. The 28-year-old para-swimmer took bronze at the women's 50-meter freestyle. It marks the 11th medal win for Rivard, who also competed in Tokyo, Rio, and London. That tally includes 5 gold medals. Up next, the Canadian connection to a stellar discovery in space and how it could help explain an age-old mystery. This looked like a successful launch of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, but it's now grounded and being investigated by the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration after the rocket's reusable booster failed to land back on Earth on Wednesday. It's SpaceX's second grounding in 2 months and could threaten the Polaris Dawn mission, which the company has been trying to launch this week. If Polaris Dawn does eventually go ahead, it's expected to see the first ever commercial spacewalk. The James Webb Telescope has pushed the limits of astronomy since it launched back in 2021, helping scientists understand how galaxies, planets, and stars form in our universe. And recent images captured almost 1,000 light years away show what astronomers call rogue planets. Heidi Petracek explains what that means and the Canadian innovation behind the discovery.
You're looking at a stellar nursery, young stars only a few million years old, captured in this stunning image by the James Webb Telescope.
Well, first, the image is just gorgeous. It's absolutely fantastic.
But it's more than just a pretty picture. Researchers at Johns Hopkins University found 6 proverbial needles in this haystack of the universe. Green circles marking so-called rogue planets 950 light years away.
And by this, we mean these objects that are kind of free-floating in space, untethered to any star or any body in space.
Maybe they just form without a star, and they just form like a star, but they have very, very small mass. Or they were, at some point, part of a planetary system, and with interactions, they were kicked out.
To see them, researchers had to use a Canadian tool known as NIRISS to detect light from far outside our solar system.
It was the first time we applied it to study young stars, something in our galaxy.
What they observed helps explain how planetary masses form, whether in disks of gas and dust around young stars, much like Jupiter and our own solar system, or from a cloud of gas and dust untethered to any star's gravity, like these free-floating objects.
Is the solar system typical or rare?
The fact that we didn't find anything below 5 times the mass of Jupiter shows that we are probing the very limits of star formation.
Knowing the size to look for helps narrow down the field in the search for planetary bodies yet unknown.
If we are able to one day travel to these places, what will we see? What will we find?
Questions scientists hope the James Webb Telescope will help answer someday. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
And that is Global National for this Thursday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is this whitetail buck near Blaine Lake, Saskatchewan. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.